The goal is we need to get people saved. We need to get their spiritual souls into heaven. And that's been the evangelical emphasis for thousands of years. We got to shovel people's souls into heaven. Vector says, why do you think post-mill is such a rare point of view? I think when people look at the world around them, I think they find it very, very difficult to think of it optimistically. So I think when Christians look at the world around them, they think things are generally bad. And so they kind of immediately assume postmillennialism can't be true. Because postmillennialism is optimistic about the spread of the gospel, about the growth of Christianity, about all of those things, because it's generally optimistic about those things. I think a lot of people struggle with the optimism of postmillennialism when they look at the world around them. I've had a lot of people tell me flat out, with coronavirus, with all of the riots, with all this, that, and the other, how on earth could postmillennialism be true? And so they think it's like self-evidently false. Let me draw a graph. If we assume this axis is time on the bottom, and we assume the axis on the side is goodness, and by that I mean how good things are, how Christian things are, if you will. Okay? So we have time and goodness. So Vector asks, why is postmillennialism such a rare point of view? I think for two reasons. First, I think a lot of people look at this axis, and let's just say for the sake of argument, that once we hit this point right here, we've reached heaven. Okay? Once we get to here, whatever this line is, okay? Once we get to here, that's heaven, right here at the top. And when people look at the world around them and they think we're right, forget this axis, what it represents or anything, but if you think we're right here, then, like, if you look at the world and we're right here in terms of worldwide goodness, then you're like, postmillennialism can't be true. We've been here 2,000 years. And this is how good the world is right now. It looks bad. So, I think people struggle with postmillennialism for two reasons. The first reason is that things around us look bad. And so, therefore, the optimistic outlook of postmillennialism doesn't feel plausible. But the second one is this. I think Christians in general tend to over-spiritualize the gospel. What Jesus is doing has almost nothing to do with the physical realm, but everything to do with the spiritual realm. So, their measure of goodness is primarily a spiritual measure. How many people in the world are Christians? How are we doing spiritually? How many people are turning away from Christianity? That sort of thing. And so, because we over-spiritualize our sense of goodness, we tend to look at the world around us from a spiritual framework and say, things are bad, things are bad. But I believe that Jesus came to redeem things not only spiritually, but also physically. That he is transforming the current earth. That's part of what he has done. He is returning us to a state of the Garden of Eden. And if he has done that, then I think physical progress in the world also counts. I think that also counts for goodness. Whereas a lot of Christians tend to view the world purely in spiritual terms and don't look at the physical redemption as any sort of thing that Jesus is involved in. So, for example, let's say we make progress in medicine, and medicine is saving people's lives. The Christian who views progress or goodness in terms of what I'm talking about, a spiritual progress, won't see the invention of any sort of medication as being part of the gospel, as being part of what Jesus is accomplishing here. It's a distraction or it's something else. It's almost besides the point. Whatever. The goal is we need to get people saved. We need to get their spiritual souls into heaven. And that's been the evangelical emphasis for thousands of years. We got to shovel people's souls into heaven. And that's where you get a lot of the reduction to getting your ticket punched and get a ticket into heaven. But I believe that Jesus is doing much more in the gospel. I believe he is redeeming this world not only spiritually in the hearts and lives of his people, but also physically. I believe both are happening. So when I see some sort of advancement in medicine that improves the quality of life of people, that lengthens our lifespans or gets us closer to an Edenic state, I chalk that up to a victory for Christ. And I think that is something that he is doing. So when I look at our current state in the world and I say, where are we at? It seems to me that we're doing quite well. But it's because I think physical progresses count too. And I don't think the doctor that invented something that cures or helps people necessarily has to be a Christian in order for that progress to be made in the name of Christ. Christ has redeemed the world in such a way that even unbelievers are pursuing the good of mankind. And I see that as a win for the sake of the gospel in terms of improving the human condition. So because I consider goodness in terms of both physical and spiritual growth, my dot is much further along than I think most people's dot. If you consider the world simply spiritually, how many people are Christians and how many people are real Christians at that? I can understand how you might think the dot is down here. There don't seem to be very many Christians, and then there are a lot of people who claim Christianity but aren't. The dot seems to be pretty low. But if you consider physical progress and advancement as also the gospel winning, then you might see the dot as a little further along. Now, I have one more thing to add to this. I don't care where the dot is at. I could even grant that the dot is way down here and that spiritual progress is all that matters. If this length of time that Jesus is going to be doing this is, let's go with 100,000. If this is 100,000 years, it makes sense to me that 2,000 years in, the dot would be pretty low. That makes sense to me. We don't know how long the length of time is. So it makes sense to me that the dot would be pretty low. And then 50,000 years in, it might be out here. We just don't know how long this length of time is. I don't think it's going to be 100,000 years. But I could even grant that if we're living in the infancy stages of the gospel's world conquering, then things could look bad spiritually. But comparatively to where we used to be, we've improved. So I think that's a viable reading of all of this as well. One final point. I believe there are ups and downs to this thing. And this could go on for a long time, up and down, up and down. You could even end up lower. If we were in a valley right now, we wouldn't know it. Let's say people think that the Reformation, Presbyterianism was a real high point for Christianity, and that we've really gone down from there. A lot of people view the world that way, that the USA has regressed. We could be in a valley, and this thing could continue going up and down, up and down, up and down until we reach heaven. So you might be in the lowest valley. Look at this. Look if this is your relevant history, if this is your historical framework. Oops. If this was your historical framework and you're looking at this, and then we're right here, if all you're looking at is this part of history, doesn't it look like premillennialism is true? Look, we've been headed downhill for a long time, guys. Yeah, you're missing the bigger picture. You're missing the bigger picture. You see? If you're just looking at that narrow scope, man, it looks exactly like premillennialism is true. But if you look at the bigger picture, there are peaks and valleys all through history. So that's my rough ideas of why I think postmillennialism isn't very popular. Vector says, so does the pandemic set that point of view back any? I think it could just be one of these. Yeah, and I know you asked that question, Vector, before I drew all of this. So I completely understand that. So yeah, the pandemic could be one of these. Here's the other thing, Vector. We might be here. I think we have such a small view as Christians over what's actually going on. The pandemic might actually be improving things spiritually and physically. I don't know. I know God has woken up a lot of churches. The pandemic, although on the outside may look like a disaster to us, might be exactly God's purpose, plan, and intention. What if he is using the pandemic for an upswing rather than a downswing? It could be either. But what if he is using the pandemic as an upswing rather than a downswing? That's not outside the realm of possibility. Not at all. Vector says, and are you saying that this earth will physically return to Edenic state? If so, what about the new heaven and new earth? I feel that we will essentially arrive at the new heaven and new earth with this earth, right? This earth is going to become the new heaven and new earth. I don't think the new heaven and new earth is God wiping away everything that happened on this earth and starting over. I think what happens in the new heaven and new earth is that the city of Jerusalem descends to this earth. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and first earth had passed away. There was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will no longer be any more death, nor any more mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. So I think the new Jerusalem descends to this earth, and then that's the new heavens and new earth. That setup, that situation. And again, guys, I am not strong on eschatology. This is one of my weakest areas. So I'm just spitballing. Okay? I want you guys to know that. DJ says, personally, I think a lot of it comes to the idea of being part of the inside crowd. How the rest of the world is getting worse, but they are the only good ones with the inside knowledge. So a Left Behind style end times fits that outlook better. Pre-trib or pre-mill or whatever it's called. Yeah, I've got you. And I agree with that as well. We tend to isolate ourselves to a very small community that are the chosen ones. They're the elect. And they have to be Reformed Baptists who believe in premillennialism or whatever, you know. And we kind of make the circle that small. And so for us, it's no wonder that we were in a bad situation or a bad state. Vector says, I think that's pretty clear as the U.S. was founded on Christian principles, and now everyone is in a dead sprint away from Christianity. So, and that's fine if that's your perspective, Vector. I still think it fits. It fits no problem with postmillennialism on a big scale. What if God wants to destroy the United States and build something greater out of it? I don't know. And we also have to wonder if the Christianity that was built and founded in the U.S. is actually the sort of Christianity that God wants. We have to ask that question too, I think. Because many would say that the Christianity that was built and founded here was not actually what God was going for or looking for. And so we need to, in a sense, improve upon that version of Christianity, you know? Lafayette says, but the positive is the U.S. is a vessel. Look at the seeds we have planted, Japan, Korea, and even China. So while one ebbs, another flows. I think that's very good, Lafayette. we also tend to think of us in terms of, we tend to base our eschatology around us. So if we don't do it around our church, our small church that we've built, we might do it around our nation. Our nation is falling apart. Yeah, a lot of other nations are doing really well right now. So perhaps that's God's plan. Don't know. Hey guys, Pastor Chandler here, and we try to answer a lot of people's questions here on the channel. If you have your own question that you would like to ask, please put it in the comments below, and we'll try to answer it as soon as we can. We may even make a video about it in order to address it, okay? So thanks for being here. Take care. God bless. Bye now.